Good evening and welcome to this Times Plus event for the film Operation Mincemeat, which opens on Friday, April the 15th. My name is Kevin Marr, I'm the chief film critic of The Times, and I'm delighted to be joined by two of the stars from the film, Kelly MacDonald, who plays Jean Leslie, Matthew McFadyen, who plays Charles Chumley. And we are all delighted to be joined by my colleague, Ben McIntyre, upon whose book the film is based. The story of Operation Mincemeat is a tale of two remarkable intelligence officers who changed the course of the war and saved tens and thousands of lives by recruiting the talents of a very unusual super agent, a dead man. That's my précis of it. It sounds preposterous when you say it, and my feeling watching the film is the allure is a huge part of the allure is the preposterousness. So I'm going to start with you, Ben, first. When did you encounter it, and is this part of the DNA, just the oddness of the whole story?
Absolutely. I mean, the story of this Operation Mincemeat was revealed actually quite soon after the war. And it's sort of embedded in our cultural memory in some ways. But the story that came out immediately after the war was itself partly false. And so it's a bizarre story. And it's, what I love about it is that it's completely invented by the characters themselves, who are themselves kind of invented characters. I mean, the technical term for them is they're pretty bonkers, both of them. But it's the strange alchemy by which they come together to cook up this bizarre plan. I mean, just to give you the background, the year is 1943. The Allied armies are massed in North Africa for the invasion of southern Europe that everyone knows is coming. But as Churchill said, everyone with an atlas could tell where they were going to land. It had to be Sicily. So the spooks had the job of trying to persuade Hitler that instead of it being Sicily, they were going for Greece. And the vehicle that they chose for this was a dead man.
Okay, but when did you encounter that idea and think, oh yeah, this will make a great book that will subsequently become a
There was a film made, you'll know it, the film that was made after the war, 1953, The Man Who Never Was, which is a wonderful black and white film, but it's really sort of Brit propaganda, really. So I knew about that story, and then in 1996, the British government began releasing the Mincemeat files. And they are, and I'm not exaggerating, they stand about that high. They're about, I don't know, 20,000 pages. I mean, it's a huge archive. And it's wonderful because it has the kind of warp and weft of the story in it. Minute by minute, you can track exactly what happened, including, for the first time, the identity of the character that they used in that. So that was really my trigger to do it. And I was just really lucky, actually. I mean, it was just luck of timing. I wish I could claim it was brilliance on my part, but it wasn't. And at that point, some of the protagonists were still around. I met the character on which Jean Leslie is. I met Jean Leslie herself, and so I had that lovely combination of both documentary evidence and living witness, which is gold dust for these stories.
And did you know that a film adaptation of some sort seemed likely even when you were writing the book?
In truth, I thought it was quite unlikely. Okay. Because the book as I finished it is 330 pages long, and it's quite complicated. I mean, it's quite a complicated story, this, because there are overlapping layers of deception going on. And I wasn't quite sure how you could really make a film out of it, but it's brilliantly, John Madden and Michelle Ashford have managed to kind of, it is a true story. They've been very, very loyal to the essence, the emotional essence of the story, and it works brilliantly because it's both a sort of love story and an adventure story and a spy story and a comedy. I mean, it has rich sort of absurd elements to it, which is also true of the original plot.
Yeah. John mentioned there was a caper-esque quality, which hadn't occurred to me, but of course it is at the beginning. Because it's so preposterous. Yeah. They're sort of stumbling and bumbling a little bit, aren't they?
Absolutely, and as Colin says, as you and Montague, we're going to play a humiliating trick on Hitler. Yeah. But as it continues and the stakes get higher and it becomes clear that actually this is a huge gamble, it takes on the caper becomes darker and darker, which is so brilliant, I think. Mm-hmm.
So when did you two performers encounter it? Was it just, did you see it in screenplay? Did you go back and read the book? Or maybe did you know about the idea?
I heard about it strangely because this is my third film with Colin. Okay. And so Colin told me the story. Like, we were having lunch, yeah. And he said, oh, John's making a film and he wants me to play this part. And his habit is, like, he never wants to do something and then you have to kind of talk him into, like, that's his conversational thing. Like, so I felt like I was there going, that sounds amazing. Oh, that sounds really good. And of course he's going to do it, but he just, I don't know. Anyway, so he told me about it, and then a few weeks later, I got a phone call asking if I wanted to be a part of the film and play this amazing.
Did you have you? I was going to say, have you read the book, or did you need to go back?
Next question. Yeah, I've read the book. It's really big.
It's quite boring, actually.
How many pages? 300.
It's a chest crusher. No,
no
one in their right mind.
But I watched your documentary.
Oh, that was hilarious.
Which is so hilarious, and you look like you're having such a good time.
Just loving it.
Yeah.
No, it was good fun. That was a while ago now.
That was 2010. Am I going to put my foot in it again and say, did you read the book?
I did read the book.
Okay.
I did, yeah. I hadn't read... I'm a big fan of this gentleman here. But I knew there was a... I didn't know about Operation Mincemeat, but I knew there was I knew about Montague, I think, and I might be wrong, with something to do with Eddie Chapman.
Yes,
because he
that's
ran
right.
him, or he was
that's
one of
right.
Agent Zigzag's handlers, which is an extraordinary story.
Yeah.
Again, which Ben written about, and but the story was fresh to me. I didn't know about it.
Charles, your character, doesn't he have a massive moustache? Or he's an extraordinary looking character.
Yeah.
When you read it, you think, oh my God, am I going to...
Well, it's always weird when you play a real person because you think, you always fall short. Because because they're always either more dishy than you, or they're thinner. So you go, God. And Charles Chumley looked extraordinary by all accounts. I mean, he was sort of very, very tall and very thin and very sort of gangly and had this lolloping walk, and everyone knew him when they sort of see the shape walking along Whitehall or Horse Guards. So. Yeah, but I did my best to grow a big moustache.
No, or is that more?
That was
terrific moustache.
Moustache and specs. At which Colin Firth was furious because I had all the. That was my performance.
He'd find that.
Yeah, he wanted a beard. They said no.
I insist on you having a moustache when we work together.
Yeah,
so
I will only ever work.
He's only ever had a moustache when we've worked together.
Nice. Okay, classy. This is a question for the two of you, and this is like one of the central nubs of the film is the romance. I know in your book you say you leave this door open where you say. When Montague says, I was faithful to my wife, and you say, he may have been true. And so there's a suggestion that I felt that you were punting the ball on to John Madden to say, right, let's go for it with the romance. So my question is like twofold. Was there a romance? Is there a romance? Does the romance matter? What's going on with the romance?
Look, I mean, I knew Jean Leslie, and I got to know her very well. And I asked her this question more than once. And every time she was in her 80s, she was still very flirty in her 80s, and she would just giggle and say, oh, darling, don't be so silly. Which, in a way that made you realise, of course something happened. Mm-hmm. I mean, in wartime, those romances bloomed and blossomed in a sort of strange way, very suddenly. We don't, and we'll never know, really, whether there was a full-blown romance. There was certainly more than a tendresse. They were very, very close. Into their 70s, they were still writing to each other as Pam and Bill. They had completely inhabited the characters in this story, the sort of two invented lovers. And certainly Ewan's wife was worried enough about it to come beetling back from America, as was his mother. I mean, the picture of Pam that was used in The Deception, Montague kept it on his dressing table. So there's evidence. We'll never really know, but there's certainly enough to create this lovely emotional core of the film, I think.
Okay, so Kelly, then, because I was thinking that in the scenes when they're walking, you and Colin Firth, they're talking about Pam and Bill together, and you performing it, acting it, mm-hmm. You're walking like a tightrope between, because as a viewer you're thinking, are they flirting? They definitely are flirting, or is there multiple takes that exist where one is really straight and one is completely over the top, or is
No, I give the same performance every time.
No input.
No, I think it was a really fun thing to be able to play with Colin because we know each other so well. So it was really easy to sort of to joke around with it and to flirt a bit. I think there's a very I just imagine what it felt like for them in this basement must be kind of what it's like for actors. I mean, there's a strange sort of connection there because we spend
Certainly.
a huge amount of time together and we get to know each other quite intimately and in a way that is quite unusual.
It's odd and heightened,
It's not a normal
and it's
office.
finite as well because you know the job's going to end.
Yes,
and
you're
you
on
know,
a project. Yeah.
So it's a weird. But we talked about that, didn't we? Because it sort of melds. It sort of spills over into it's all the same sort of pot because you invest imaginatively and emotionally.
That's
in
the
these,
thing, yeah.
You do as actors certainly, and these people were because they have to and
We
they
got
want to make
carried
it.
away.
Yeah.
a bit,
So
yeah.
whether they really felt it or not, it sort of doesn't matter. It's part of the job, and then it bleeds into real life.
And as Colin says, there's that lovely line where he says, reality is either something true or it's what we want to believe. And that is also true of the romance.
Sure.
That as viewers, we're all sort of wanting to believe it, and we're all invested in it. But whether it's true or not is the whole story really is about the kind of gap between truth and
I
artifice.
suppose people talk about emotional affairs, and that's as real, I think, as anything physical. So
Yeah.
even if,
Yeah.
you know,
Brief encounter is, I suppose, the sort of, is the sort of from that origin.
Sure. Matthew, I think you talked about the caper element, or I want to talk about the comedy in it, because it doesn't strike you as natural comedy material, but I wondered how much, I'm talking about a very specific scene. It's such a throwaway moment, but I love it when I'm watching a film and there's a moment in it that just seems emblematic of bigger things, and it's the moment when Charles tries to join the toast. They're all toast, and he misses the toast.
I love that.
I'm just looking for a gag.
Yeah.
I'm always looking for a gag.
So obviously it's a kind of a sucky question because you're amazing, but it's was it in the script or was that?
No, that just came out of.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. That just came.
Awkwardness.
And it sort of felt quite natural. It wasn't something I thought because he is quite sort of out of sync with everybody. He's trying, and I think certainly at that time all kinds of emotions had sort of, and he's trying to not feel things and to concentrate. And so.
It's making him quite angry, really, which is
And he,
comical.
yeah, and I don't think he knows why he's angry or sort of mean to you during the day.
Horrible.
It was really revolting to Gina's. Yeah.
So were there discussions around the film about not how funny should this be or should we inject? There's also you get some nice lines about novelists, and also is there, or is it just obvious that a serious subject matter benefits from tension release? Of a
So, and
gag?
it was there in the script certainly.
Yeah.
I'd say Michelle had put some moments of sort of gallows humour and and
Yeah.
very dry.
And
stuff.
Jean Leslie's character as well, it was there in the script where she's entertained by the attention and kind of, it was all in there.
And very sort of watching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it's definitely there in reality too. I mean, they were fully alive, the protagonists of this story, to the absurdity of it. And right from the beginning, they realised there was something patently ridiculous about what they were trying to do.
Probably bound to fail. I
Yes.
mean, they must have been anticipating absolute disaster from the get. I mean, that's the only safe way to go ahead, isn't it? And then.
Well, I'm not sure if they were anticipating disaster so much as I think they just thought it wasn't going to work.
Yeah,
And
a
then
million
when it-
banana skins ahead. Yeah.
And then when it did start to work, they started to panic.
Yeah.
Because they
Really
suddenly
frightening.
realised that this thing was unstoppable.
Yeah.
And they couldn't draw it back. So that's where the sort of gallows humour really works, I think, is because you suddenly... It's not that funny anymore, and thousands of lives are at stake. And in that room, in room 13, you can feel the kind of pullulating tension as it's getting... suddenly, what have they wrought? What, in this effort to play a trick on Hitler, have they actually ended up doing?
Sure. I have an adaptation question for you, Ben, which is there's so many details in the book that I liked that obviously there weren't in the film for obvious reasons at the time, but the stuff I love, the Charlie Chaplin XX from the Dictator, and there just seemed to be an indecent wealth of material that you could have just flung at the screen. So my question is, I'm going to ask you to be ridiculously honest, but I know you won't. It's like, were you ever watching the film and just thinking, oh, they missed the best bit, or do you have pet things in the book that you love that didn't make it?
There were bits. Look, there are one or two bits that I'm particularly fond of, but that's only. You couldn't get it all in. It would be unwatchable. I mean, there's so many little sort of side bits. But one of the elements, and I know John was also keen to get this in the first draft, and there just wasn't space for it. But I loved the fact that when they got the dead body, they consulted Britain's senior pathologist, a man called Sir Bernard Spilsbury. And by the way, everyone in this story has names like Spilsbury and Bentley Purchase and Montague Chumley. And they asked him, this character's poisoned himself with rat poison. And he said, oh, they'll never be able to detect that, he said, because in order to be able to detect rat poison, there would have to be a Spanish pathologist who is as good as me, and there aren't any. Which was wrong in two respects, because one, there was a pathologist in Huelva who was quite as good as Spilsbury. And secondly, he was quite wrong. I mean, the poison would have been easily detected if they'd done a proper autopsy. So I loved the fact that this sort of pompous sort of man in a club sort of laying down the law about what was totally wrong. It was another great hostage to fortune, but there are others in the film, as viewers will see. It wasn't, but so that was one of the details I loved. But,
Can we go a bit artsy and talk about the theme? The theme. What's the film really about? Because one of the things I love about it is the novelists. The meta narrative from Fleming, and just the sense that it's just all about creation and lying and faking and fiction, and when that bleeds into reality. So, I have a million questions about that, which is just about the preponderance of novelists in the intelligence community. Seems weirdly, unusual. Or is it not?
I think there's not a huge difference between being a novelist and being a spy. I mean, there is a reason why the great novelists of the 20th century are mostly spies. Somerset Maugham, Graham Greene, John le Carré, Ian Fleming, John Buchan. They were all involved in intelligence at some point. That's what they did. Roald Dahl had a dabble in it. Yeah. What did Stella Rimington do when she stood down as head of MI5? The first thing she did was start writing novels. She still is writing novels. So I think there is a confluence there. And what novelists do is create an artificial world and try and lure people into it. And the better you can do that, the better novelist you may be. That's what spies do too. You create a kind of alternative world, and the better you can convince somebody that it's reality, the better you're going to be at it. And so I think there is it's fascinating, I think. And Ian Fleming, who was really the originator of this idea, even he got it from a novel. So it starts in a novel, it goes to someone who's about to write the definitive spy novels of the 20th century. From there it goes to a group of frustrated novelists who are then start making it up madly and inhabiting the whole thing. After the war it is revealed in yet another novel, which then allows Ewan Montague to publish his non-fiction version, which then leads to the film, which then leads to another book, so it has these extraordinary iterations of imagination. I mean, it's about thinking your way inside somebody else's head.
We were saying though it's a bit like I've not been in a writer's room, but I've heard a lot about them through work, and it just sounds like...
Sounds like a big writer's room.
Yeah.
I mean, with the higher stakes, arguably. Second series of things, quite high stakes as well. That was a really crass thing to say. But it did, because they're all spitballing.
Yeah.
They're all saying, what about this? Could it be, has he got a girlfriend? Is he good with money? Is he,
And did you see your characters as storytellers?
Yeah, certainly in those scenes in the club and
always kind of that's as well. Just any job feels like that. Yeah.
And does it in a writer's room? Does the same thing happen where people slightly up the stakes on each other? They'll say, well, if he's going to have a nicotine habit, let's have him fly kites. If he's going to,
let's have him explode.
Let's have him explode in chapter 3. I sort of imagine in those writers' rooms there must be a sort of slightly competitive creativity that goes on, and that's undoubtedly the case in this story. I mean, they were trying to slightly outdo each other in little bits of granular detail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Was this shot during COVID? Am I imagining it? No, or was it before?
We just got away with it.
I finished. It was on my birthday, my last day, the night shoot. So that was 23rd February, and then I think it was like March. You finished.
I finished just before.
Just before.
Yeah, the day before.
Yeah.
And they all went to Spain.
Yeah. And they just made it. They just
I think
made
Spain
it.
closed their airspace.
Yeah.
A few days after the final.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And so it was then edited all the way through the pandemic. Okay.
Yeah, it was all done remotely. I think John did it with sort of people in different parts of the country.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so when was the... I was going to say, actually, I know, Matthew, you've seen it on your iPad, but I picture a group screening together, or, you are going
There was a
to
cast and crew.
I went to the cast and crew.
Didn't
What?
make it.
I actually, there was once a premiere. Colin, actually, it was
Right.
with Colin. The first job I did with Colin. Years later, he was like, "Remember at the premiere, blah blah blah," and Sherry Blair was there, and I was like, "What premiere? I didn't get invited to a premiere."
You were probably working.
Yeah.
I don't
You were on
think
set
so. I think
It was quite a small thing.
Yeah, were you there as well?
Yeah,
Great fun.
Everyone was there. Everyone was there. It was brilliant.
Okay, I have a sort of TV versus movie issue, which is obviously I'm the film critic, so I'm very proprietorial about movies, but I find myself in an era where it's the golden age of telly. I think you two obviously have been in Line of Duty, Succession, two of the sort of juggernauts at the front of that obviously people adore, and they're rightfully. I'm trying to bring it back to Operation Mincemeat, and I want you to say, but there's something perfect about making just a one. Are they the exact same, just longer experiences?
I don't quite often. I'm not. Attention to detail is not my strong point, as Matthew will tell you. But quite often, it's after the fact I realise what I'm actually making.
Okay.
I mean, generally, I know if it's a TV series,
Yeah.
but that way, I don't know in what form it's like, if it's going to be on Netflix or how it's going to be shown.
Sure.
I'd agree. I mean, it's sort of the nuts and bolts are the same when you're on a film set or a TV set, I'd say.
Yeah.
And I think it's odd because for a long time people were quite snobby about you're aware, and I've never understood that. And now that TV's having a resurgence, it's no bad thing.
Surely, though, there's a coherent arc from start to finish.
There is. There is. There's more. I think films are harder. That's probably. I think it's really, really difficult to make a really good film, and it should be difficult.
Yeah.
And long form TV, maybe you've got longer to sort of find your way, and it's got just the function of it being 10 episodes or more. Yeah. But for us, I'd say it's the same. Being on set with whether we're on a TV set or a film set doesn't make any difference.
Good. Okay. Let's get going with the questions. Ben, this is from, this is from Mortality. I can't see. Okay, this is from James Fudge, who says, if Operation Mincemeat had failed, how many lives do you think could have been lost?
It's impossible to quantify. I mean, that's an impossible question to answer, because that's a real what if. But there's absolutely no doubt that, unlike most spy stories, and I shouldn't be saying that because I write rather a lot of spy stories, this one made an important strategic difference. Spies usually just oil the wheels of traditional diplomacy, or they make us a bit safer. This one actually strategically altered the battlefield, and it's quite clear from the Bletchley Park intercepts that Hitler moved troops from one war theatre to another largely in response to this. Not solely in response to this, but largely in response to this. So who knows? I mean, maybe, who could put a number on it? But let's look at it the other way. What would have happened if they'd rumbled Operation Mincemeat, and instead of moving troops from Sicily, they'd reinforced the beaches at Sicily, which they were perfectly capable of doing. I mean, the panzer divisions were there already. You'd have had a bloodbath. I mean,
how many people, was it 150,000?
160,000.
Okay.
160,000. You could have lost half of them, and lost the beachhead. I mean, it could have been absolutely calamitous. And it was a critical moment in the war, because the war on the Eastern Front was also in the balance. And if Hitler had been able to hold back the southern invasion, he could have poured troops to the east. We might all be speaking German. I mean, that sounds like an exaggeration, but it's hard to put a figure of casualties on it, except to say that it's one of those very few hinge moments in history, I think.
Sure. Okay. Matthew, you're next. Robert Hodgman asks, in the research of the book, was there a chance to speak to family and friends of your character?
No.
How did you research your character then? Didn't.
I just had a grown moustache and that. No, I mean the script. I mean it's the script in Ben's book, and we had a really lovely rehearsal period. We had a week or 2 weeks even.
Yeah, it was great.
It was
Actually,
really
don't
good.
always get that.
So yeah, that was sort of. I mean, and the script was wonderful, and Ben's book has more research than you can. It's just like a dream.
We'll read it. I'll get
You
around
don't
to
have
it.
to. No, it's fine.
Yeah.
There's a good film coming out.
Oh, yeah.
And
what
sometimes
you
it's
make-
odd to. I mean, because you're not doing an impersonation of the. Unless it's someone everybody knows exactly what they look like, or you were alluding to that earlier. It's sort of okay to. It's an impression. Yeah. You know.
But Matthew, you may not know this, but Chumley's son Tom.
Tom, yes. Well, I'm
came.
hoping to.
Well, you might meet him later, but he came to one of the early screenings, and his father died when he was very, very young, so he didn't really know him, and it was so touching that he felt that you had kind of captured.
Oh, good.
Because Chumley was so discreet. He never really wanted to tell this story.
No.
He was sort of almost pathologically secretive. And I think the Chumley family feel that finally he's kind of got the credit he deserves, and that you've captured something that for Tom was sort of, again, we're talking about imagination and reality, but he really had to imagine his father because he didn't really know him. And so I think for him it was a deeply moving experience. And Chumley's wife, Alison, said the same thing, that you'd caught magically the essence of this very interesting and strange man.
That's very nice to hear. It must be very strange if your relatives are, just the anticipatory worry about it, because you never know how people are portrayed.
Yes, no, absolutely.
That's great.
Okay, I've got another research question you're going to love. Kira Pritchard asks, what did you do to research your character?
What's her problem?
Tell her to back off.
Yeah, mind your own business, Kira. That's what I say.
Right, moving on.
No. Well, I watched the documentary, but like it's all there in the writing, and if it's not in the writing, then I haven't been in a position where I've had to do a massive amount.
Sure.
Like I've had to learn physical things before, like dancing. I had to.
Ride a horse. That's good.
Yeah, horse and cart. I did on something. That's great.
Did you say you did the dancing scene?
Yeah, so I learned the Lindy Hop.
Okay.
And that was fun. It's really great dancing with a professional dancer.
Yeah. Not great dancing with Matthew Companion. Because he steps or he breaks your toes.
Proper dancer.
Trained dancer. Yeah.
I've got a serious question about research, which no, it's not research. It's about Ben. Do you? I know you're going to answer, but do you dare give notes, or No,
I wouldn't dare do that. But actually, Michelle and John were very generous in asking me whether the tone of the thing was working, because I wouldn't dare ever write a screenplay because I don't know how that alchemy works, but I do kind of know the language of that period and some of the cadences and so on, and that was fantastic. They were very generous in asking my opinion on those, but John was. I asked him at the beginning, what is my role, and he said, you can come on set and say they wouldn't have worn a hat like that, and we can ignore you.
Okay.
Which seemed to me to be a very good deal.
Yeah.
I thought that was exactly perfect description. I was very happy with that.
Okay, Kelly, I'm going to give you another one. William Wheeler says, this is the nice one. What did you enjoy most about making this film?
Honestly, I enjoyed our green rooms, our various dusty rooms we were put in. Around the place to do. Yeah. Just like, it was hard to get us out of the rooms. ADs would come and say, we're ready for you on set, and I was more obedient than you and
We were
Colin.
quite chatty. I know. It was very convivial. Okay. Yeah, it was lovely.
Yeah, it was really nice.
Do you think that translates on screen? It's a genuine question. If there's a film set where it is convivial and people are just connecting, do you think that there's a soupçon of that on the screen?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, I think so as well. Because people talk about chemistry. It's quite disappointing if you see in a review there's no chemistry between you and someone, and you think you can't. Yeah, there was a lot of chemistry. It felt like good chemistry.
Yeah. Okay. Back to you, Ben. Here we go. Okay. Peter Stockwell Jones asks, what are Ben's thoughts about the rumour that the body was not Glyn Michael, but a sailor from HMS Dasher?
I can hardly bring myself to address this question.
Okay, wow.
Because this is the longest running conspiracy theory, and it's not true. There is absolutely no doubt that the body used in this operation was that of Glyndŵr Michael. There is a sort of mad red herring that's been running for years that it could conceivably be someone else, and this comes from the fact that when Ewan Montague wrote his book after the war, it itself contained a massive deception, which he stated that he'd given his word to the family that he would never reveal the identity of this man. This wasn't true. They had simply stolen the body, and he was covering that up. But it launched a sort of search for the man who never was that continued for 50 years, and weirdly still continues, even though the files have all been released that prove that it was Glyndŵr Michael, that it was this Welshman, this homeless Welshman. In order to believe otherwise, you'd have to think that MI5 was so brilliant that it was able to plant a false name and wait 50 years for it to be found, which just defies belief. So I don't give much credence to that.
Sure. I have a question about The Man Who Never Was. The film, in the film says, like, Stephen Boyd plays this IRA agent who's sent by the Nazis to interrogate, the veracity of the story. In my review, I said that's not true, but now I'm suddenly panicking. Is that true?
No,
okay.
That's complete nonsense. No, absolutely, no, definitely not. In fact, the British system was so good during the war that there were no enemy spies. There were, and that bit when
in the UK,
in the UK, right? Because Bletchley Park intercepts were so effective. Every time a spy arrived, they were either executed, imprisoned, or turned and used to feed information back. So there really weren't any others, which is why when Montague says that, or I can't remember if it's your character or says, our eyes and ears are everywhere. That was literally true. There was
in regard to Montague's, to Ivan.
Well, in regard to any enemy spies getting into Britain, it just did. Well, with one exception, they did find a man in a bunker in Cambridge who went by the unimprovable name of Engelbertus Fucken. And nobody's ever worked out where he came from. He was clearly an enemy parachute spy. So the
that needs to be a film, doesn't it?
I think it's a film.
Yeah, I mean, just the name is enough.
The Fucken story. No, I think.
Meet the Fuckins, yeah. Okay. One for you, Matthew. Lorraine Chapman, actually, you might need a bit of Ben's help. Lorraine Chapman asks Matthew, were the two intelligence officers, or at least was Charles, involved in any other information or disinformation strategies in the war?
It is a Ben question, but I think certainly Chumley was.
Chumley was definitely involved. He was deeply involved in the Double Cross Committee, the 20 committee.
But that was to do. I mean, they were running agents and double agents, and a matter of course.
Yes.
And then the misinformation thing was the 20 committee
evolved out of that.
Right.
Yeah. No, but he'd been quite deeply involved before. Montague less so, I think. But Chumley had been quite deeply involved. The Double Cross Committee was specifically responsible for cooking up what was called chicken feed, which is kind of information that is true but non-nutritious in the sense that you can feed it to the enemy without any damage. And this was being used by double agents. So they were really there to monitor what was being sent back. But Chumley stayed in MI5 after the war,
posing as a locust hunter and destroyer.
There's a tremendous photograph of him in full Bedouin outfit, enormous moustache, Bedouin outfit, hunting locusts. Clearly not hunting locusts. Clearly kind of up to no good. And then he ran a machine shop in Somerset.
Wow. Okay. Kelly, back to you. This is again. I don't think you might need Ben's help for this because it's about the background. It says Catherine Hurst asks Kelly, how were paper documents such as letters, photos, and even theatre ticket stubs protected against water damage from the sea, so that they could be read when the body was discovered?
They weren't. I mean, that was the point. I mean, they were meant to be as damaged as the sea would have made them. I mean, there's a whole bit in the film about waterproof ink and whether, as Churchill says, only if someone expecting to drown will write in waterproof ink. And that was true. So they had to experiment and find sorts of ink that wouldn't run. But the whole story hinged on it looking as believable as possible. So ticket stubs can survive in salt water indefinitely. They were more worried actually about the typed letters because it was difficult to make sure that those didn't run. But they were well sealed up and the water would have got in. And that was, again, part of the plot. They were supposed to look real. And the wonderful thing about the Mincemeat archive is that it contains all those documents. I mean, the originals are all there, the handwritten, still crinkly paper on which the sort of fake love letter is written. It sits in the archive. You can hold it. So it's come all the way back from. Sorry, I don't want to give it away, but it's the artifact from the film is a thing.
Yeah. Someone, as you're talking there, I remembered someone's asked you a question, Ben, and I bet you won't be able to find it. About it's a sort of research question about how aspiring novelists can get access to the archives, or if you're a novelist, basically. It's like if you're writing a novel today. How do you get access to government secrets? You know, what is
Writing about contemporary spying, very, very difficult.
Okay.
I mean, because that is all digitized, and the lawyers are routinely going through intelligence files and weeding out anything that is either actionable or interesting. So it's going to be very difficult for future historians. The wonderful thing about this period is that everybody wrote everything down, and so it exists on preservable paper. But that, you know, if that's a question about how modern espionage works, in a way, it's not so different, because the other day I visited GCHQ, the sort of government cipher centre. They have a program called Operation Mincemeat, which is a training program for how you create a false identity online. So if you're trying to penetrate, say, a terrorist cell in Raqqa, and you want to do it under a different name, you have to have a backstory. And that backstory has to be trackable digitally. So how do you create somebody with their Facebook profile, their boyfriend, their mum, you know, the national insurance number? So Operation Mincemeat is a training program. So they're still doing the same thing. If you think that this idea is completely preposterous and no one would ever want to invent anybody, well, they do. It's absolutely central to modern espionage.
Okay.
May have given away official secret there.
Too late. Okay, this is for you, Matthew. It's a bit heavy, but it's from Debbie Cuthbert, who asks, do you think this film will carry any resonance for the present situation in Ukraine?
Well, I had a couple of... I think my honest answer is that what's happening now is so enormous and you know, and current, and sort of looking at it as helpless bystanders. Trying to find a correlation or a resonance is difficult and maybe even facile, certainly from me. So I don't, you know, it's a very specific story, this, isn't it? And we're looking back 80 years, you know, so I don't know is the answer. And I wouldn't, I'm not clever enough to venture.
I've got an answer.
Yeah, go on.
Is it not about the sort of, you know, in Operation Mincemeat, it's so nuanced and sophisticated, the disguising of truth, and there's so much effort, whereas now Putin just bombs someone and goes, we didn't do that.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, it's just,
Yeah.
there's no spycraft anymore. It's just like, no, that's fake. You know, there's like, why would you bother dressing up a body and dumping it in the water? You can just go on social media and say,
it's openly poisoning people years ago.
I think that's right. It's fake news, isn't it, rather than actual sort of deception
Yes,
operating.
exactly.
It's a sort of...
back to you, Kelly. Sorry.
What? Don't make that noise.
Miriam Akari asks, what's the most amazing fact you learned about this operation?
Oh no!
You're always getting the what's the
The
top
best,
one.
the worst, the most?
Well, the eyelash is quite interesting, isn't it? I like that. That they thought to put an eyelash in an envelope to tell whether it had been opened or not.
Yeah. That reminds me of James Bond and the hair. You know.
Yep.
You know.
On the door.
Yeah. So, I'm guessing the buzzsaw. This is totally going into details, but the buzzsaw can't have been true. They didn't have a whizzy buzzsaw back in 1943.
No, but they had all sorts of terrific gizmos. I mean, they had that Q branch came up with some brilliant stuff.
Yeah.
And he was the inspiration. James Fleet's character was the inspiration for Q.
Yeah, absolutely. No, there was I forgot his name. He was called Gordon something or other, who was the head of Q branch.
Charles Fraser. No.
Charles Fraser. That's it.
Yeah.
Brilliant,
Yeah.
brilliant. That was Charles Fraser, and my favourite of his inventions was a garlic flavoured chocolate, which was to give to people parachuting into France, so that they would smell right when they landed, so that their breath would be. But I also love the idea that you couldn't get an English person to eat garlic unless it was in chocolate. So all these sort of...
Yeah, it says just a clove of garlic.
Yeah, exactly. No, it has to be in chocolate so that they can kind of land properly and smell right. Isn't that brilliant?
Yeah.
But no, the buzzsaw, I think, alas, I think he's not. But the eyelash is completely true. And it was Jean Leslie's eyelash.
Romantic.
Which is, well, again, I mean, it reinforces the idea that there was more to this
Yeah.
than just a kind of made-up story.
Yeah. What about old Charles on the submarine? That's I had a quibble with that because he clearly, from your book, wasn't in the submarine.
No.
Did he need to be on the submarine for dramatic, tension, or to be the end of that climax with Colin Firth?
I don't know. I guess perhaps dramatically it was good for a separation between you two and for that moment in the story. But I was happy to go. Yeah, I was happy to go to the
To
submarine.
make that sacrifice.
Yeah, I would have jumped in.
Yeah, well, it wasn't. It was a studio tank or something. Wasn't
Twickenham.
it? Okay.
Yeah, glamorous.
Also,
Twickenham
the
studio.
racing car driver as well.
That's all true.
That's all true.
It's
Yeah,
so bonkers.
that
that-
is bonkers.
That's all
isn't
true.
it?
Jock Horsfall. There's still a Horsfall trophy at Silverstone every year in his memory.
Do you not think the film almost needs a sort of a warning at the start, like, no, really, this is true?
Yeah, no,
Because
really.
at that point,
I thought you were going to say, "Don't drink and drive."
drinking and driving is terrible.
Well, it has a sad ending, that particular story, because actually he did die on the motor racing circuit. In the end. I mean, he didn't long survive the war. I mean, he went back to racing and it didn't last long. But no, in a way, that's the bits of this story that I love the most, are the incidental, most unlikely elements of all of that. And Jock Horsfall was completely mad.
Yeah. When you were researching it, though, was there, as somebody who's writing the book, were you just, cheering inside every time you came across a more bonkers piece of?
Yes, it was like I could. Much of it I had to kind of slightly pinch myself. I mean, particularly, for example, the Ian Fleming connection. I knew nothing about that when I first started researching the book. I had absolutely no idea that Fleming had anything to do with this story, let alone that he'd sort of been one of the originators of it. And it was full of those moments where suddenly I would head off down these, what I thought would be rabbit holes, and actually you'd then find the most amazing sort of little bits of gold at the end of them.
It's brilliant that he goes on to write, James Bond has no doubt about anything in any operation. I mean, it always, and this is so riddled with smoke and mirrors and doubt.
Absolutely.
It's just great.
It's interesting, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think that's a reflection of Fleming's own character. Cause he
there's no ambiguity. There's just
absolutely. There's a right way and a wrong way.
Okay, so that's all we have time for. I'd just like to thank our three guests, Kelly MacDonald, Ben McIntyre, and Matthew McFadden, for coming here and talking about a truly remarkable film.